A Shot in the Dark by Silverpup. Chapter 28. This is really not necessary, Bilbo grumbled as they marched through the battered battlefield to Thranduil's camp. Really, the orcs and goblins are dead and gone, and there are elves patrolling the area. I am perfectly safe walking back to camp by myself. Of course you won't, reassured Bomber from his left side. But we worry over you. We want to make sure you're safe for the elves on men. And from yourself, Nori added from his right. Bilbo gave him a side-eyed glare. Those comments are why Dory doesn't leave you alone with Ori. Or with anything shiny, Bomber contributed with a wide smile that went against the gleam in his eyes. Nori sniffed and waved a lazy hand. Details, irrelevant amount of details. Now tell me, are we going to visit the other woman? He raised his brows and stared at the thief. What? He's talking about Bard, Bomber explained quickly. Yay! Your new mistress! The other dwarf chirped. The hobbit closed his eyes and took in a deep breath before releasing it through his nose. Do you say these types of comments around Thorin? Because if that's true, then I think I know why he went crazy on us all. Please, Bilbo, give me a little credit here. Do I look like the type that told the warrior king? Nori asked, holding a hand to his chest and giving the hobbit a wounded look. Yes, Bilbo and Bomber replied in unison. Well, yes, maybe I would told Thorin a little bit, the thief admitted, holding up two fingers and pressing them nearly together to show the exact amount. But even I know when to back off. Thorin went crazy all on his own. He didn't need any help from me. No, that blasted stone did it all, he muttered, kicking a stray pebble across the ground. I'm tempted to mold it down and remake it into the world's shiniest chamber pot. That sounds lovely, the cook remarked without batting an eye at the hobbit's odd idea. Perhaps you should ask for the Argren stone as a wedding gift. I'm sure Thorin would give it to you then. He squinted up at the dwarf through the morning light. What makes you so sure we're getting married? Thorin banished me from his sight, remember? Yeah, but he didn't ask for his beads back, Nori pointed out, tugging lightly on one of the beads in question. And have we forgotten the battle so quickly? I'm pretty sure I saw him protecting you there. Just because you love someone doesn't mean you're meant to be, he said quietly, because he knew better than anyone that love was not enough at times. What will his people think of me? And his sister and the rest of his extended kin? Not everyone is as accepting as all of you. Thorin has to take all of that into consideration. Thorin would not make a decision about marriage so lightly, Bomber chided gently. You know that he always puts his duty first. He would not choose you to stand beside him if he did not believe you would be a good spouse and ruler. Bilbo shuddered and wrapped his arms around himself. Don't say that word. I'm no leader. I couldn't even lead my team during the picnic games. Well, the consort doesn't exactly rule the mountain. Their job is to maintain the court, assist the king when needed, and look after the heir, Nori explained, counting off the different jobs on his fingers. You already keep the company in line. You stop Thorin before he does something stupid, and you keep a sharp eye on those two wolves we call princes. I think you have this consort thing down by now. Bomber nodded eagerly at the other's words. The consort is not a king, Bilbo. They do not need to sit through negotiations or lead an army into battle. They are there to help the king and care for the people when the king cannot. All of these are jobs you can do. Bilbo wasn't sure about that. For such love and devotion. And if he could not find it in himself to care for Thorin's people, then how could he ever handle sharing Thorin's heart with them? When he finally arrived at the camp, Bilbo forced his babysitters to return to Erebor. He pointed out that he was now safe with the elves and men and did not require an escort any longer. He also reminded them that they all needed to rest and the two would not feel completely at ease sitting around a bunch of elves. So, with great reluctance, the duo bid him farewell and returned to the mountain with the promise that he would visit them soon. Now alone and free of his bodyguards, the hobbit began to hunt down Bard, who was the last of his friends that he had not checked on. He had paid a visit to Bifur and Phoebe before he left, and found that both dwarves were alive and healing. Whether they would live in the coming days, no one could say, but Bilbo felt that the odds were in their favor, especially since Bifur had a Bolver watching his every move, and Keely refused to leave his brother's side. He found Bard in bed in one of the many tents set up for the men. He was battered and bruised, but conscious. His arm was bandaged from elbow to wrist, and he was sporting a nasty black eye that made his eyes swell shut. His naked chest was also a portrait of war, with the many bruises and scratches that colored his pale skin. Bilbo paused before him, placed his hands on his hips, and took in the battered man carefully. "Well, I suppose the black eye is an improvement. Now, if I turn my head and squint, you could almost pass as handsome." "No jokes, my back hurts too much to laugh," Bard groaned, covering his face with one hand. "I'll hold back then," promised the hobbit as he made his way over to sit beside the bed. "How do you feel?" "Sore. I'm shaken. Very shaken," the man admitted as he shifted slightly to sit up comfortably. "I've never been in such a battle before, and I hope I never will again. The thing is, I saw out there. I don't know how I will ever sleep peacefully again." "Time will erase some of it," he reassured with confidence, "but not everything. You won't ever really be the same now, but you don't have to be broken either. Just take some time to mourn for the fallen and accept that life will go on." Bard opened his good eye and peeked at the hobbit through his fingers. "Why do you sound like you've done this before?" "Because I have," he replied with a small shrug before quickly changing the subject. "I was told that I have you to thank for ending Azog. You have my eternal gratitude." "I wasn't exactly aiming for glory when I killed the orc. I was just trying to stay alive," the man explained modestly as he dropped his hand. "I hardly deserve all this praise I keep getting for the deed." Bilbo scoffed and rolled his eyes. "You ended an orc so fierce and vicious that it could kill kings and heroes without pause. Do you really think you don't deserve some acknowledgement for such a feat?" "I was just one of many out there yesterday," Bard countered quietly as his dark eyes stared off at something in the distance. "I watched many men, good men that I grew up with and lived beside for years, get cut down like they were nothing more than buzzing insects. Elves and dwarves that I never met until yesterday fought and died to protect me. How can I call myself a hero when it is their blood that brought us our victory?" The hobbit sighed and nodded. He understood where Bard was coming from. In his first lifetime, he too had been hailed a hero for deceiving Smaug and fighting in the battle. He never understood then why anyone would say that, and he still could not comprehend it now. How could they not see that the real heroes were the ones who gave their lives to stop the battle? "Do you need a hug? Because if you do, then I know a guy," he said quietly, because the language he shared with Bard was one built on humor and sarcasm. Bard snorted and then laughed his boyish laugh that made his face less grim and much younger looking. No, thank you. The only hugs I want are from willowy figures with long, soft hair." He arched his brows and widened his eyes until they began to water. "You want a hug from Thranduil?" "No, women," the bowman said, even as he kept laughing through his words. He hissed slightly and wrapped an arm around his side, but didn't stop chuckling. My body aches. I think I made things worse with all that laughing." "Would you like me to leave?" Bilbo asked. "No, I like the company," the man assured, waving a lazy hand. "What happened to your coat? I thought you never took it off." "Huh? Oh, I used it to bind Thorin's wound in the battle," he explained as he thought back to his beloved coat. "I don't know where it is now." "Oh, so I heard that the Dwarf King had been wounded badly. Is he still alive?" Bard asked quietly, watching the hobbit. He sighed and pulled one leg up to his chest to rest his chin on. "At the moment, yes, but that may change in the coming days." "Was it hard, meeting him again in the battlefield?" the archer questioned with a small frown. He shook his head, making his braids bounce against his face. "No, it wasn't hard. I yelled at him and called him a fool. He yelled back and told me to leave the battle. I called him a bigger fool. He took an arrow protecting me, and then he got stabbed." Bard blinked his one good eye and looked at the hobbit like he didn't know if he wanted to give him a hug or a punch. "Do you ever stop and wonder, how is this my life?" He groaned and pressed his forehead against his knee. "Every day, Bard. Every single day of my life." The man made a noise in his throat that sounded like he was going for comforting, but just couldn't muster up the energy to care. You really love him, don't you? Yes, I do, he admitted quietly, shuddering slightly at the grip his emotions had over his heart. Very, very much. You have horrible taste, he snorted. I am aware of that, thank you. No, I mean really horrible, Bard insisted. Really, really horrible. Couldn't you choose someone a little more stable? At least someone who can balance out your brand of crazy. Bilbo frowned and looked up at the man. Bard, I balance out his stupidity most of the time. And that doesn't scare you? Bard wondered, staring at him with his brows raised. In reply, he kicked the man in the arm and then laughed as the archer cursed him out. Later that day, Bilbo found himself somehow roped into negotiations between the dwarves, elves, and men. He still wasn't sure how that happened, but he blamed Gandalf and his fast talking. That was why he ended up sitting at a round table with Gandalf, Thranduil, Bard, Balin, and Dane. Dane was still battered, and the slash across Balin's face was still red and puffy, but they both looked aware enough of their surroundings. Bard looked faintly uncomfortable sitting up straight in the chair, but he wasn't complaining, so Bilbo didn't speak up either. We had a verbal agreement that was witnessed by your king and all those dwarves, Thranduil said, dressed impeccably as ever in silver and green. If it wasn't for the faint hint of bandage peeking from under his sleeve, Bilbo would never have thought the Elven King had just seen battle. You cannot ignore that. I also returned the Oakenstone to you in exchange for gold and age. We have not forgotten, admitted Balin with his hands crossed over his stomach as he leaned back into his chair. But you must understand that we have yet to divide the treasure up amongst us. We also have not even begun to go through and price the treasure hoard correctly. With all this in mind, we cannot give you the portion just yet. Fine, I will wait for it, the elf replied with a small tilt of his head. But only if you sign a contract that acknowledges my claim. I will not have you all backing out because your king changed his mind yet again. Balin exchanged a look with Dane. We will sign a contract, Dane agreed as he perched his elbow on the arm of his chair while running his other hand through his beard. But Thorin could still refuse you. He gets the final say in this. Thranduil bared his teeth in a smile that looked more like a snarl. Then you best convince him otherwise. Dane's blue eyes glimmered with a hint of that savage brilliance Bilbo had seen the night before, but the dwarf did not rise to the bait. What of Lake Town? Bard asked, speaking up for the first time. We participated in the battle too. We deserve some sort of recognition. We will give you our reward, Dane replied without looking at the man. Bard clenched his jaw and sat up straighter. That's not good enough. I want a contract too that promises compensation to the family of each man that died out there. I also want you to fulfill your promise of paid work that you brought a few weeks back. Balin winced while Dane arched one brow as he finally looked at the archer. At what rate do you have to demand a contract from us? The dwarf lord drawled, his blue eyes settling on the man. Let alone the gold you ask for. We will reward your services, yes, but we are not obligated to do any more than that, boyo. Dane, said Gandalf, the warning in his voice clear enough. Bard is a descendant of Girion, the last lord of Dale, Bilbo said before anyone else could speak up. He plucked his elbow on the table and rested his cheek on one closed fist. After Smaug destroyed Dale and took over Erebor, he stole all the treasure from the wreckage of Dale and added it to his hoard. Technically speaking, some of that treasure in Erebor belongs to Bard and the other descendants of Dale. Whose side are you on? Dane demanded with a scowl. How do you know that? Thranduil questioned sensibly. He shrugged. I saw some of their coins and pottery in Erebor. They all bore the stamp of Dale. Gandalf looked at the hobbit with frank curiosity. How do you know what the stamp of Dale looks like? It has not been used since the city fell. It has a giant D and an arrow behind it. He droned, rolling his eyes. That was rather a big tip-off. Dane looked to Balin, who could only shrug. He's right. That is the Dale symbol. Then you do owe us a portion, Bard pointed out with a wide grin that looked more threatening than friendly. I want a contract drawn up by the terms I mentioned. Fine, but we add our own conditions as well. Dane stated, narrowing his eyes. The both contracts. Now it was Thranduil's turn to narrow his eyes. Such as? First, all treasure given must first be approved by Thorin after 3 weeks. The dwarf listed without blinking. He is king, and this is his kingdom. We have no real authority to give it away yet. Thranduil looked like he wanted to roll his eyes, but was resisting because it was too close to actually showing emotions. Fine, what else? Second, after you receive your portions of treasure, all debts are fully paid. You cannot come back to us in a few months saying that we did not give you what you deserve. Once you are paid, we owe you nothing, Dan explained. Thranduil's lips dripped down slightly, but it did not protest. Very well. Anything else? The third and final condition is that you must not use Thorin's past actions against him when he is formally acknowledged as king. Balin added before Dan could speak. He looked at the man and elf with diamond-hard eyes that made his resemblance to Balin very obvious. He will face enough doubters and questions over his right to rule in the coming days. We do not need outsiders also challenging his ability to lead. But the sickness that took over, is it gone? Or does it still linger? Bard wondered, raising one black brow. You'll find out when he wakes up, Bilbo replied, rolling his eyes. But he seemed almost back to normal when I saw him in battle. I think being away from the Arkenstone helps him fight the madness. We really should get rid of that thing. All it does is sparkle and drive my cousin mad, Dane mused, tapping one of the gold beads in his beard. Balin smacked him in the arm. Leave it alone before Thorin ends up punishing you too. The dwarf scoffed and tossed his thick hair back. It would never do that. It loves me like a brother. Gandalf snorted and just looked at him. He banished Bilbo. Dane frowned and looked to the hobbit, who grinned at him, and then to Balin. I may have to rethink that plan. You know that, the dwarf said in the same voice he used when talking to Fili and Kili. Now, shall we get back to our contracts? Do you both accept the terms we offer? Bard shrugged and looked at Thranduil, who closed his eyes and took in a deep breath. Agreed, the Elven King said slowly, as if the words were physically painful to say. Bilbo wondered if it really did offend him to sign a contract with the dwarves, or if he was just being his melodramatic self like usual. Gandalf smiled the same smile that he always wore right before he lit up his fireworks. Wonderful. Let us begin writing out the contracts then. With luck, we will finish by nightfall. He walks slowly up the cracked and broken stone steps. A good portion of the staircase is missing. Entire sections have fallen off and other parts have crumbled into ruin. But the gaps prove no challenge for him. He jumps over them easily and continues his way up to the tower. Below him, he can hear the rumbling of the orcs as they assembled. Their grunting and lumbering footsteps echo against the stone. If it was not for him, then everyone in Mirkwood would hear the beasts. His lips curl back at the thought and reminds himself to teach them how to be quieter. When he finally reaches the top of the tower, he crosses his arms behind his back and looks out over the forest. He can see the creeping blackness spreading over Mirkwood, a slow but steady disease that will soon paint all of Middle-earth. His lips pull back into a smirk at the thought. This time he will not lose. Bilbo bolted straight up aghast. He was sweating and his skin was chill, but the unsettling images in his head stood out the strongest. Although he had never laid eyes on him before, he knew without a doubt who that stranger was from his dream. Somewhere in the back of his mind, the ring began to croon one word over and over again. Sauron.